For decades, countless families waited, holding onto a sliver of hope for answers that never seemed to come. In evidence rooms across the country, cold case files gathered dust, the boxes becoming silent tombs for untold stories. Meanwhile, those responsible for these tragedies walked free, their secrets buried by the passage of time. But the years 2024 and 2025 marked a turning point, igniting a revolution in forensic science that finally delivered justice to victims who had waited generations for the truth. This revolution is powered by incredible advancements in DNA technology and a new field called forensic genetic genealogy. These breakthroughs have completely transformed how cold cases are investigated. In state-of-the-art labs like Othram Inc. in Texas, forensic scientists are doing what was once considered impossible. They can now extract usable DNA profiles from tiny, degraded, or contaminated pieces of evidence items that, just 5 years ago, would have been dismissed as useless. Every single day, these labs are unlocking clues from the past and solving cases that had long gone cold. But technology is only part of the story. The power comes from the relentless persistence of the human spirit. In the dedicated cold case, detectives who refuse to let a file be forgotten, poring over old evidence with fresh eyes. It's in the unwavering advocacy of families who never stop fighting for their loved ones, keeping their stories alive and pushing for new leads. When you combine this incredible determination with these new forensic techniques, the results are astonishing. Investigators are now solving dozens of cases from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Each breakthrough is a testament to their hard work and brings long-awaited closure to families who have endured decades of painful uncertainty. So, how exactly does this new science work? Let's talk about forensic genetic genealogy. You've probably heard of consumer DNA tests that help you build your family tree. Well, this technique applies a similar principle to law enforcement. Investigators take the DNA profile from the crime scene and upload it to specialized databases to find distant relatives of the unknown suspect. From there, expert genealogists meticulously build out family trees, using public records and historical documents to narrow down the possibilities until they can identify the likely source of the DNA. This is the very same technique that famously cracked the Golden State Killer case. And since then, it has helped solve hundreds of cold cases across the nation. The impact of this revolution is profound. Headlines that once read, "Case unsolved," now declare justice served. Tonight, we're going to dive into the stories behind those headlines. We'll explore 10 real cold cases that were finally solved in 2024 and 2025. Thanks to these incredible DNA breakthroughs. These are stories of justice, of closure, and of hope that finally arrived after decades of waiting. Thank you so much for joining me. If you find these stories as compelling as I do, please consider liking this video. Section 1. Esther Gonzalez case, 45 years, solved 12 minutes, Scene 1. The 1979 disappearance, February 9, 1979, Beaumont, California. It's just after 7 p.m. on a Friday. 17-year-old Esther Gonzalez leaves her boyfriend's home on Santa Mateo Canyon Road. She's walking along Highway 243, heading towards her family's house, about 1.6 kilometers away. But she will never get there. In the vintage photos here, we see Highway 243 today, okay? But what did it look like in 1979? Back then, this was an unincorporated community. Guess. Esther walks. She passes by the old El Rancho Market, where the parking lot is now a Chevron gas station. She continues past the market and up the hill on Highway 243. Just beyond the curve of the road, her body will be found the following day. Scene 2. Early investigation the next morning. When Esther doesn't show up for school, her mother Maria goes to the police. An interview with Maria is conducted, and they ask her if Esther could have run away. Maria is sure this isn't the case. Meanwhile, a search is organized with dozens of officers combing through the area. Soon, their efforts are rewarded. about 5.6 kilometers from where Esther was last seen. Her clothes and personal belongings are found along the side of the road. What we're looking at here is a 1970s era interview. Footage from the time shows investigators going through these items and cataloging them. The case quickly turns from missing persons to murder. Detectives believe Esther was abducted while walking home. Scene 3. Cold case status in the early stages of the investigation. The lead detective receives a call from a neighbor who believes a local man may have been involved in Esther's disappearance. The neighbor told him she had seen Lewis Randolph Williamson, aka Randy Williamson, talking to Esther on the day she vanished. On February, deputies locate Williamson, who confirms he was in the area that evening, but claims he only stopped to ask Esther for directions. He takes and passes a lie detector test, and his story checks out, according to the investigators, and so the case stalls. Fast forward to 2023. After 4 decades, this case has gone cold. Investigators haven't given up though. They continue to pursue every possible lead. They keep Esther's case active and preserve a sample of her DNA. At the time, genetic testing technology wasn't advanced enough to extract usable data from the available samples, so it was stored away, never to be forgotten, but not acted upon. That is, until now. Scene 4, 2023, DNA Genealogy. 2023, advances in genetic genealogy allow for more in-depth analysis of DNA evidence. With this in mind, the preserved DNA sample is sent off to Othram in Texas, one of the leading labs specializing in forensic genealogy. Othram uses advanced sequencing equipment and software to examine the decades-old sample. This cutting-edge technology allows them to find out the identity of some of the people in Esther's family tree, and from there, Othram is able to generate investigative leads that can be followed up on by law enforcement. Scene 5. Reviewing old leads back in 1979 that neighbors' tip led investigators to Williamson. Now, in 2024, they follow up on Williamson once again, but this time with a different approach. Here, we see a detective reviewing 2 files side by side, one from 1979, the other from the recent DNA report from Othram. We can see the names and relationships listed on the left-hand side of the screen. The 1979 file contains handwritten notes, while the 2024 report is printed in black and white. Here we can see some of the names mentioned in both files are the same. On the right-hand side of the screen, we see 2 photos of Williamson and a close-up of his driver's license. This Williamson is the same Williamson from 1979, now deceased. He passed away back in 2014. Scene 6. DNA match confirmed. One thing stands out in the 2024 report. Under the investigative column, we can see a tick next to DNA analysis. This is a huge development. Williamson never underwent DNA testing in 1979. Now, this oversight is finally corrected, and the results are in. Overlaid onto the photo of Williamson's grave are the results of the laboratory match report. Initially, the lab gives the probability of excluding Williamson as being Esther as killer as 0, and as you can see, it's highlighted in red. This means that the DNA profile obtained from Esther's body matches that of Mr. Williamson with an infinite statistical significance. Anyhow, to rule out any doubt, the team requests an additional test and a second analysis is performed. Again, the match is highly significant. The statistics in this report state that there is a 0 chance that the sample came from anyone other than Mr. Williamson. Scene 7. Official resolution with all of the evidence against him. It's clear that Williamson was responsible for Esther's death. Now, the announcement can be made public. On November 20th, 2024, members of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department stand outside holding up the seal for the County of Riverside. They are joined by Maria, Esther's mother, and her niece, Christina. Behind them is a banner reading Cold Case Homicide Team. Now, after 45 years, Esther's family and friends can finally get some closure. During the press conference, Maria thanks everyone involved in the case and speaks on behalf of her granddaughter, who was 12 weeks old when her mother disappeared. She says she has questions, and I tell her Grandma will get the answers. Christina tells reporters that although it's a relief to know what happened to her aunt, it's tinged with sadness because ultimately her aunt will never get to rest in peace. She went on to say, I feel like my aunt was worth fighting for. I am glad they did unstop, even though she was a teenage girl whose case went cold. Scene 8. Family's response. Here we see a family photo montage of Esther. She is pictured as a baby, a child, a teenager, and also with her mother Maria and her father Alfredo. At the end of the press conference, reporters are given 3 photos from the family, each showing Esther at various ages. All 3 are marked as public domain or licensed for media use. We see Esther as a baby being held by her father, then as a child standing in front of a Christmas tree, and finally as a teenager lounging on a couch with her mother. Scene 9. Impact on cold cases. Now let us take a look at some of the cold cases that are still waiting for their moment. On the screen here, we see a montage of cold case files, similar to the ones seen in Scene 5. And just as with Esther's case, many of these cases might have been resolved long ago had the technology existed. With that said, most of these cases don't have the luxury of waiting decades to receive a solution. In the center of the screen, we see a close-up of one of the DNA machines used by Othram. This company was integral in linking Williamson to Esther's case. Using advanced equipment like this, experts were able to extract and analyze Esther's DNA. The Othram lab was instrumental in helping bring this case to a resolution after 45 years. And in doing so, they bring hope to the families of other victims still waiting for answers. Back in 1974, a bright young artist and horse lover named Mary Kay Schley was hitchhiking, trying to get from one place to another. Tragically, her journey was cut short. She was brutally stabbed, and her body was discovered in a rural area of Dunn County, Wisconsin. For 50 long years, the person responsible for this terrible act remained a ghost, a mystery that haunted the community and her family. Imagine trying to solve a crime like this back in 1974. DNA testing, the cornerstone of modern investigations, was still science fiction. Detectives had to rely on the tools they had. Witness statements, which can be unreliable, fingerprints, and whatever physical evidence they could find at the scene. They worked tirelessly, chasing down every possible lead and interviewing anyone they could. But despite their best efforts, the trail went cold. There were no solid leads, no clear suspects, and the case was eventually filed away, unsolved. But here's where a crucial decision changed everything. The Dunn County authorities meticulously preserved every piece of evidence they collected from the crime scene. Among those items was a simple hat found near where Mary's body was discovered. They couldn't have known it at the time, but this act of careful preservation, a decision made half a century ago, held the key. It was a time capsule of evidence, just waiting for the right technology to unlock its secrets. Fast forward to 2024. Investigators, unwilling to let Mary's case be forgotten, decided to take a fresh look at the preserved evidence. They submitted that old hat for advanced DNA testing using a groundbreaking technique called forensic genetic genealogy. Scientists were able to extract a tiny, degraded DNA profile from the hat. From this small sample, they began to build a family tree, tracing the DNA back through generations to find potential relatives of the person who wore it. This is where the real detective work of the 21st century comes in. The DNA analysis pointed investigators toward the family of an 84-year-old man named John Miller by painstakingly building out the family tree using public genealogy databases and historical records. They were able to narrow down the pool of potential suspects. They traced distant family connections, eliminating possibilities one by one, until all signs pointed to Miller as the person whose DNA was on the hat. After 5 decades of searching, they finally had a name. With this powerful new evidence in hand, the Dunn County Sheriff's Office made their move. In 2024, they arrested John Miller. During the interrogation, they presented him with the undeniable fact. His DNA linked him directly to the hat found at the crime scene 50 years earlier. Faced with the science he couldn't refute, Miller's decades of silence finally broke. He confessed. In his confession, Miller laid out the heartbreaking events of that day. He admitted he had picked Mary up while she was hitchhiking. He made an advance, and when she refused, a struggle broke out. That struggle tragically ended with her death. For 50 years, this dark secret remained buried, but thanks to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of DNA, the truth finally came to light. At a news conference, investigator Dan Westland reminded everyone what this was truly about. He said, "We do want to forget that this is about justice for Mary and bringing her family closure." He urged people to remember Mary not for how she died, but for who she was, an accomplished artist, a skilled equestrian, a beloved sister, and a cherished daughter. After half a century of uncertainty, her family finally had the answers they had longed for. The resolution of Mary's case is more than just one closed file. It's a powerful testament to the importance of preserving evidence and the incredible advancements in forensic technology. It sends a clear message that no case is ever truly cold. For other families waiting for answers and for law enforcement agencies working on decades-old unsolved murders, this success offers a profound sense of hope, proves that with persistence, dedication, and the right tools, justice can be served, no matter how much time has passed. Imagine it's December 1975. The air is crisp in Colorado, and a sense of freedom is everywhere. For 19-year-old Tyree Becker, a self-described free spirit, it was just another day. On December 4th, she decided to hitchhike to Brighton to see her boyfriend. It was a common way to get around back then, a sign of trust in a simpler time. But as the hours turned into a day, and then another, a chilling realization set in. Tyree never made it. Her journey was cut short, and the family's nightmare was just beginning. 2 days later, on December 6th, the worst fears of Tyree's family were confirmed. Two motorcyclists were cruising down a country road when they spotted something unsettling in a field off 100th Avenue and Lowell Boulevard in Westminster, a suburb just north of Denver. There, they discovered Tyree's body. Her clothes and personal belongings were strewn nearby, painting a grim picture of her final moments. The peaceful field had become a crime scene, and the search for a missing person had tragically turned into a homicide investigation. The community was shaken, and a long, arduous quest for justice was about to begin for the Westminster Police Department. Investigators immediately got to work, trying to piece together what happened to Tyree. An autopsy was conducted, and the findings were heartbreaking. The medical examiner determined that Tyree had been sexually assaulted and had died from asphyxiation. Detectives were meticulous, collecting every piece of physical evidence they could find at the scene. They had biological samples, but this was 1975. The forensic technology of the era was limited. DNA profiling as we know it today was still the stuff of science fiction. They had the evidence, but the tools to unlock its secrets simply didn't exist. The attacker had left a ghost of a clue, one that would remain invisible for decades. Years turned into decades, and Tyree Becker's case file grew thicker, filled with notes, reports, and dead-end leads. It became one of those haunting cold cases that grizzled detectives passed down to the next generation. One investigator after another would pull the file from the shelf, poring over the details, re-interviewing old witnesses, and looking for any angle they might have missed. They were relentless, driven by a commitment to find answers for Tyree's family, but each time they hit the same wall. Without a way to identify the killer from the evidence they held, the case remained stubbornly frozen in time, a constant, frustrating reminder of justice denied. Then, everything changed. By the early 2020s, forensic science had taken a quantum leap forward. Techniques that were once unimaginable were now standard practice in crime labs. Investigators, ever hopeful, decided to resubmit the biological evidence so carefully preserved from Therese' case nearly half a century earlier. This time, scientists could apply cutting-edge methods, including forensic genetic genealogy. This powerful new tool allows investigators to build a family tree from a DNA sample, tracing it back through public databases to identify potential relatives of an unknown suspect. The ghost in the evidence was finally about to get a name. In February 2024, after nearly 48 years of waiting, the breakthrough finally came. The complex work of the genealogists and DNA experts pointed to one man, Thomas Martin Elliott. The DNA profile, built from the 1975 crime scene evidence, was a match. Investigators now had a name and a face for the man who had haunted their department for decades. A quick look into his background revealed that Elliott was no stranger to law enforcement. He was a career criminal who had spent a significant portion of his life cycling in and out of the prison system for various offenses. The puzzle was finally coming together. As detectives dug deeper into Thomas Martin Elliott's past, a disturbing pattern emerged. His criminal record was extensive, a long and sordid history of offenses that painted a picture of a violent and dangerous individual. His documented behavior and the nature of his crimes aligned chillingly with the brutal attack on Therese Becker. He was the right age, in the right area, and had the violent tendencies to be the prime suspect. However, during his lifetime, no one had ever connected him to Tyree's murder. Without the power of DNA, he was just one of many potential leads that went nowhere. He had managed to hide in plain sight, his darkest secret buried with him. But secrets from the grave can't hide from science. While the identification of Thomas Martin Elliott was a monumental victory for investigators, it came with a bittersweet reality. Elliott would never stand trial or face a jury for what he did. He had died of natural causes back in 1991, just 16 years after he murdered Tyree. He lived and died without ever being held accountable for his crime. But for the Westminster Police Department and for Therese's family, the case was finally closed. 33 years after his death, technology had reached back in time to expose Elliott as the killer, providing the irrefutable proof that had been missing for so long. In 2024, the Westminster Police Department held a press conference to announce the resolution of their oldest cold case. After 48 long years, they could finally tell the world who was responsible for Tyree Becker's death. For her family, the news was overwhelming. They had lived for nearly half a century with the torment of not knowing. The what-ifs and whys had haunted generations. While the justice they received was posthumous, it was justice nonetheless. The confirmation, the certainty of knowing the truth, brought a profound sense of peace. The agonizing chapter of uncertainty was finally over, allowing them to remember Terry, not for the mystery of her death, but for the vibrant life she lived. Imagine this. It's the spring of 1979 in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago, Illinois. Flowers are blooming, life is moving along, but for one family, a nightmare is just beginning. 19-year-old Kathy Hala, a bright young woman with her whole life ahead of her, vanishes without a trace. Her family, gripped by a chilling fear that every parent dreads, immediately contacts the police. They knew the times were dangerous, especially for young women in the area, but they held on to a sliver of hope. They prayed she had just run off for a bit, that she would walk through the door any minute with a story to tell. But as the days turned into a week, their hope began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The search was on, but every lead seemed to go nowhere. Every phone call brought no news. The happy, bustling life of the Holly family had been shattered, and a terrifying silence had taken its place. The family's worst fears were tragically confirmed not long after Kathy's disappearance. Her body was discovered in a river, a place that should have been peaceful, but was now the scene of a heartbreaking crime. The police arrived, and the area was cordoned off. They had a crime scene they had physical evidence, but the technology and investigative techniques of 1979 were a world away from what we have today. The initial investigation was intense, with detectives interviewing everyone they could, chasing down every possible lead. Yet, despite their efforts, the case quickly went cold. There were no witnesses, no suspects, and the evidence they had just wasn't enough to point them in any clear direction. The killer had slipped through their fingers, leaving a devastated family and a community haunted by an unsolved murder. For Kathy Halley, justice seemed like a distant, unattainable dream. Her case file was placed in a drawer, joining countless other cold cases. A silent testament to a life cut short and a mystery left unsolved. The years would pass, but for her family, the pain and the questions would remain a constant nagging wound that refused to heal. Decades passed. The world changed, technology evolved, and the memory of Kathy Halley's case faded for many, but never for her family. Then, a dark shadow from the past re-emerged. Bruce Lindahl. Lindahl was a known predator, a serial killer who had terrorized the Chicago area during that same period. His reign of terror ended in 1981, not in a courtroom, but in a violent confrontation during another attempted murder where he was killed. As investigators began to link him to other unsolved crimes, a chilling suspicion started to form. Could Kathy Halley have been one of his victims? The timeline fit, the location was right, and the nature of the crime was disturbingly similar to Lindahl's known patterns. But suspicion is not proof. For years, detectives tried to connect Lindahl to Kathy's murder, but the evidence was just not there. So the physical evidence from 1979 was old, degraded, and had been handled with the less advanced techniques of the time. It seemed that even with the prime suspect, the case was destined to remain cold. The link was a theory, a strong one, but it lacked the concrete, irrefutable evidence needed to close the case and give Kathy's family the answers they so desperately craved. Fast forward to 2023. A new generation of detectives at the North Aurora Police Department refused to let Kathy's case be forgotten. They knew that somewhere, locked away in the evidence from 1979, the killer's identity was waiting to be found. But how could they get it? Conventional DNA testing methods had failed. The evidence was simply too old, too degraded. Forensics is a field of constant innovation. The detectives learned about a revolutionary piece of technology called the MVAC system. Think of it like a specialized, high-powered, wet vacuum for crime scenes, instead of just swabbing a tiny area. The MVAC sprays a sterile solution onto a piece of evidence and then simultaneously vacuums it back up, pulling microscopic traces of DNA from deep within the fibers of fabric, from rough surfaces, from places a simple cotton swab could never reach. It was designed for exactly this kind of situation, recovering a ghost profile from evidence that was, for all intents and purposes, a dead end. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had left. The decision was made to use the MVAC on Kathy's clothing, which had been carefully preserved in an evidence locker for over 4 decades. It was a moment of incredible tension and hope. This was the final attempt to pull a secret from the past. The MVAC system was meticulously applied to the garments, its powerful suction working to dislodge and collect any trace cellular material that might have clung to the fabric for 44 years. The collected sample, a tiny amount of liquid holding potentially invaluable information, was then rushed to DNA Labs International, a lab specializing in advanced forensic analysis, ATIS. Their expert forensic scientists took over. Using incredibly sensitive techniques, they began the painstaking process of isolating, amplifying, and analyzing the minute amounts of DNA recovered by the MVAC. Against all odds, they did it. Successfully extracted a usable DNA profiler, complete genetic fingerprint of an unknown male. After more than 4 decades of silence, the evidence was finally ready to speak. The profile was ready to be compared against the National DNA Database of known offenders, and specifically against the DNA profile of Bruce Lindahl. The moment of truth had arrived. The male DNA profile, painstakingly recovered from Kathy's clothing, was uploaded into the coldest system for comparison. The results came back, and they were nothing short of breathtaking. It wasn't just a possible link. It was an astronomical match. The profile belonged to Bruce Lindahl. The statistical probability was staggering, was 9.4 trillion times more likely that the DNA belonged to Lindahl than to any other unrelated person on the planet. Okay? To put that in perspective, there are only about 8 billion people on Earth. A number like 9.4 trillion is essentially a statistical way of saying it is an absolute 100% certainty. There was no room for doubt, no possibility of coincidence. This was the irrefutable scientific proof that investigators had been searching for over 4 decades. The ghost profile recovered by the MVAC had a name, and that name was Bruce Lindahl. The cold case had just become red hot. In early 2024, the Illinois authorities held a press conference. For the family of Kathy Haley, it was the day they had been waiting 45 long years for. With the unwavering certainty of DNA science behind them, law enforcement officials officially declared the murder of Kathy Haley solved. They publicly named her killer, Bruce Lindahl, the serial predator who had died in 1981. It was a bittersweet moment. The man responsible for so much pain would never face a trial, never be held accountable in a court of law. He had been dead for over 40 years. But for the investigators, and most importantly, for Kathy's family, the declaration was a monumental victory. The who was no longer a mystery. The how was now understood. The case was officially closed. The revolutionary forensic technology had bridged a 45-year gap, reaching back in time to point a definitive finger at the man responsible for ending a young woman's life. Justice, in its own way, had finally been served. For 45 years, Kathy Haley's family never gave up. They were her voice when she no longer had one. They fought to keep her case from being forgotten, constantly checking in with law enforcement, ensuring her memory was honored, and holding onto the hope that one day they would have answers. Imagine the weight of that uncertainty, living day after day, year after year, not knowing who was responsible for taking your daughter, your sister, from you. The 2024 announcement was more than just a case closure. It was the lifting of an immense burden. The news brought a profound sense of relief, a finality that they had almost lost hope of ever finding. The what-if-s and the who could it be-s that had plagued their lives for nearly half a century were finally put to rest. Kid didn't bring Kathy back, but it vindicated their decades of tireless advocacy. It confirmed their suspicions, validated their pain, and finally, and let them know what happened to their beloved Kathy. The resolution of Kathy Haley's murder is a landmark case. It's a powerful testament to the incredible evolution of forensic science. It proves that no case is ever truly cold as long as the evidence exists. Technologies like the MVAC system are game changers, rewriting the rules of what's possible in criminal investigations. Evidence once dismissed as worthless, too old, or too degraded can now yield the very secrets needed to solve a crime. This case offers a beacon of hope for thousands of other families who are still waiting for answers in cold cases across the country and around the world. It shows that with persistence, dedication, and the right technology, justice can be found even after half a century of waiting. The triumph in Kathy's case isn't just about closing one file. It's about opening the door to countless future resolutions, bringing peace to families, and ensuring that even from beyond the grave, killers can be held accountable. On a quiet Saturday morning, January 14, 1995, the close-knit community of Beaumont, Texas, was shaken to its core. Inside her own townhouse, 31-year-old Catherine Edwards, a cherished teacher known for her kindness and dedication, was found brutally murdered. The shocking violence of the crime left a deep scar on the town and sent waves of grief through her family, friends, and the many students whose lives she had touched. The Beaumont Police Department descended on the scene, meticulously combing through every inch of Catherine's home. They collected what physical evidence they could, including biological samples they hoped would lead them to the killer. Investigators worked tirelessly, interviewing neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have seen something unusual. But this was 1995, and DNA technology was still in its early stages. The evidence they had was not enough to produce a viable suspect profile. Despite their best efforts and a mountain of collected material, the trail went cold, leaving a community on edge and a family desperate for answers. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a chillingly similar case from years before. Another woman, named Ramsey, had survived a violent attack in the same area. She bravely came forward, providing crucial testimony about the attacker's methods and patterns. Her account was a potential key to unlocking the mystery, a direct link to the man who may have taken Catherine's life. But without a concrete connection, without the DNA to prove both attacks were perpetrated by the same person, her testimony wasn't enough to secure an arrest. The link was there, but it was invisible to the science of the time, and the investigation stalled once again. For nearly 3 decades, the case file for Catherine Edwards gathered dust, officially becoming a cold case. But she was never forgotten. Her family, friends, and the Beaumont community kept her memory alive, constantly reminding law enforcement that a killer was still at large. They held vigils, shared her story, and held on to the hope that one day there would be a breakthrough. The investigators, many of whom had been on the case since day one, felt the weight of this unsolved murder, waiting for the one piece of evidence or the one technological advance that could finally crack it open. That long-awaited breakthrough finally came when the Beaumont Police Department formed a powerful partnership with Othram Inc., cutting-edge forensic lab in Texas renowned for its work on cold cases. Othram specializes in a revolutionary technique called forensic genetic genealogy. Their scientists could take degraded or minute amounts of DNA evidence samples that were once considered unusable and build a comprehensive DNA profile. This was the hope the Edwards case had been waiting for, a new chance to finally give a name to the shadow that had haunted Beaumont for so long. Inside the Othram labs, scientists went to work on the biological evidence recovered from the crime scene all those years ago. Using their advanced techniques, they successfully extracted enough genetic material to build a complete DNA profile. From there, they uploaded the profile to genealogical databases, meticulously constructing a family tree. By tracing distant relatives and mapping out the genetic connections, they began to close in on a potential suspect. Their painstaking work eventually led them to one name, a name that they could cross-reference with existing law enforcement databases for a final, conclusive match. The genetic genealogy investigation pointed directly to one man, Clayton Foreman. When his DNA was compared to the profile built from the crime scene evidence, it was a perfect match. This wasn't just a theory anymore. It was scientific proof. With this irrefutable evidence in hand, investigators had the probable cause they needed. 30 years after Catherine Edwards' life was tragically cut short, her killer was finally arrested. The news brought a profound sense of relief and a glimmer of justice to a family and a community that had waited for so long. During Clayton Foreman's trial in 2024, the courtroom fell silent as Ramsey, the survivor of that earlier similar attack, bravely took the witness stand. Her testimony was powerful and deeply emotional. When asked why she chose to relive her own trauma to testify, she looked toward the jury and said, "I wanted to see justice done for her." Her courage provided a vital human element to the cold, hard science, connecting the dots of a predator's reign and giving a voice to the victim who could no longer speak for herself. After hearing all the evidence, the groundbreaking DNA science, and the harrowing first-hand testimony, the jury delivered its verdict. Clayton Foreman was found guilty of the murder of Catherine Edwards. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole only after serving 30 years. After 3 long decades of uncertainty and pain, justice was finally delivered. Technology had caught up with the killer who thought he had gotten away with it, bringing a measure of peace to the memory of the beloved Beaumont teacher, though Foreman is currently appealing his conviction for Catherine's family. A chapter of grief has finally found its somber conclusion. In the quiet community of Three Rivers, Pennsylvania, a brutal act shattered the peace and left a family reeling. Kathy Swartz, a vibrant young woman, was murdered in her home, sparking a case that would confound investigators for decades. Despite collecting crucial physical evidence from the scene, the technology of the time wasn't advanced enough to identify the person responsible. The killer, it seemed, had vanished without a trace, leaving a community in fear and a family with unanswered questions. Back when Kathy was tragically taken, forensic DNA technology was just beginning to emerge. The biological evidence gathered by police held the key, but the methods available were primitive by today's standards. They could tell there was DNA from an unknown male, but they couldn't create a detailed profile, couldn't run it through a database, and couldn't link it to a suspect. It was a frustrating dead end. The trail went cold, and Kathy's case was filed away, joining the growing ranks of unsolved homicides. For her loved ones, the lack of answers was a constant, heavy weight. But the investigators in Pennsylvania never truly gave up. They did something incredibly important, something that would become the turning point in this case decades later. They meticulously preserved every piece of evidence from Kathy's murder. They followed the chain of custody to the letter and stored the samples in controlled, secure conditions. This wasn't just routine procedure. It was an act of hope. It was a belief that one day technology would advance enough to finally give Kathy the justice she deserved. This careful preservation was the bridge between the past and the future. Decades passed. Then, a new hope emerged. Kathy's cold case was submitted to Othram, a private forensic lab specializing in a revolutionary technology. Their scientists possessed the incredible ability to work with evidence that was once considered unusable. Using cutting-edge techniques, they can extract a DNA profile from samples that are tiny, degraded after years in storage, or mixed with other DNA, for the first time in over 30 years. The biological evidence from Kathy's crime scene was ready to tell its story. With a viable DNA profile finally built, the case moved into the realm of forensic genetic genealogy. Othram's team uploaded the profile to genealogical databases to find distant relatives of the unknown killer. This wasn't about finding an exact match, but about building a family tree. By identifying distant cousins and tracing their shared ancestors, they began to map out the suspect's lineage. It's like a massive, complex puzzle, piecing together family connections through generations to narrow down the search from millions of people to just one family. The genetic family tree led investigators to a single family that had lived in the Three Rivers area at the time of the murder. Specifically, it pointed toward four brothers. Suddenly, a case that had been cold for decades was red hot. Detectives now had a concrete, manageable group of potential suspects. They began the delicate and meticulous process of investigating each brother, looking into their histories, their whereabouts, and their lives, hoping to find the one piece of information that would finally break the case wide open. Through careful and traditional police work, investigators were able to eliminate 3 of the 4 brothers. All evidence, both genealogical and circumstantial, began to point directly at one man, 53-year-old Robert Waters. To be absolutely certain, detectives obtained a new DNA sample from Waters for a direct comparison. The results came back, confirming with statistical certainty that the DNA left at Kathy Swartz's crime scene all those years ago belonged to him. The ghost who had haunted this case for over 30 years finally had a name and a face. With the science providing an undeniable link, Robert Waters was arrested and charged with the murder of Kathy Swartz. The case against him was built on the foundation of Othram's groundbreaking analysis. What was once a cold case with no leads was now a powerful prosecution backed by irrefutable DNA evidence. The arrest sent a shockwave through the community, but for law enforcement, it was a testament to the power of perseverance and the incredible evolution of forensic science. Justice, after a very long delay, was finally within reach. For Kathy Swartz's family, the news of the arrest was a moment they had waited over 3 decades for. The years of not knowing, of wondering who could have committed such a terrible act, had finally come to an end. While nothing can ever erase the pain of their loss or bring Kathy back, seeing her killer identified and held accountable brought a profound sense of closure. It was the justice they had prayed for, a final chapter in a long and painful story. Made possible because a few dedicated investigators refused to let Kathy's memory fade. In the quiet state of Montana, back in 1996, a tragedy shattered the peace. 15-year-old Danielle Hutchins, a bright young girl with her whole life ahead of her, suddenly vanished. The community's worst fears were realized when her body was discovered by a river. She had been the victim of a brutal assault, and a murder investigation was immediately launched. Detectives worked tirelessly, questioning multiple individuals and following every lead, no matter how small. But despite their best efforts, the trail went cold. No arrests were made, no definitive suspect was identified, and the case file, filled with unanswered questions, was eventually shelved for the close-knit community and the heartbroken Hutchins family. The case of Danielle's murder became a painful, unsolved mystery that would haunt them for decades. For nearly 3 decades, Danielle's family was trapped in a nightmare of unanswered questions and profound grief. Her younger sister, just 12 years old at the time of the murder, was forced to navigate the difficult path to adulthood, carrying the heavy burden of not knowing who took her beloved older sister or why such a terrible thing had happened. Every birthday, every holiday, was a stark reminder of the empty chair at the table and the missing piece of their family. The uncertainty was a constant, gnawing presence. Was the killer someone they knew? Was he still living in their community? The not knowing was a unique form of torture, preventing any true sense of closure or peace. For 28 long years, they waited, holding on to a fragile hope that one day, they would finally get the answers they so desperately needed. Throughout all those years of waiting, one crucial factor kept hope alive: the meticulous work of the Montana law enforcement officers who first handled the case. Back in 1996, they understood the potential future value of every piece of evidence collected from the crime scene. They carefully preserved the biological samples found on Danielle's body, ensuring they were stored in optimal conditions. This foresight was remarkable. They were banking on a future they couldn't yet see, a future where science and technology would evolve beyond what was possible at the time. These precious samples sat in a secure evidence locker, a silent testament to a crime waiting patiently for the day when forensic technology would be advanced enough to unlock the secrets they held and finally give a name to the person responsible for Danielle's death. Then, in 2024, nearly 3 decades after the crime, that day finally arrived. The persistent efforts of cold case detectives paid off. Using the carefully preserved evidence, forensic experts were now able to apply cutting-edge techniques that didn't exist in the 90s. They successfully extracted a viable DNA profile from the biological material. But this wasn't just a simple database search. Investigators turned to the revolutionary field of forensic genetic genealogy by uploading the killer's genetic profile to public genealogy databases. They began the painstaking process of building a family tree, identifying distant relatives of the unknown suspect, and slowly, meticulously, closing in on their target. The 28-year-old mystery was on the brink of being solved. The genetic genealogy investigation led authorities to a surprising and chilling conclusion. The DNA profile belonged to a man named Paul Hutchinson. When investigators looked into his background, they found no apparent connection to Danielle Hutchins or her family. He wasn't a friend, a neighbor, or a known acquaintance. He was a complete stranger. This revelation confirmed the investigators' long-held fear. Danielle was likely the victim of a random act of violence. These types of cases are notoriously difficult, often impossible to solve through traditional police work, without a link between the victim and the perpetrator. There are no initial leads to follow, no web of relationships to untangle. Hutchinson had seemingly committed a terrible crime and then simply blended back into society, remaining a ghost for 28 years. Armed with this powerful new lead, police moved to make contact with Paul Hutchinson in July of 2024. When officers approached him for questioning, his reaction was anything but normal. He reportedly exhibited erratic and deeply suspicious behavior, immediately raising red flags for the seasoned investigators. They knew they were on the right track. However, the pursuit of justice took a dramatic and unexpected turn less than 24 hours after being questioned by police. Before he could be formally arrested or charged, Paul Hutchinson took his own life. His final act denied the justice system a trial and robbed Danielle's family of the chance to face him in court and hear a full confession. The man who held the answers for 28 years was gone. Even though a trial was no longer possible, the investigation needed to be definitive. Investigators obtained a post-mortem DNA sample from Hutchinson to conduct a direct comparison with the evidence from the 1996 crime scene. The results came back as a conclusive 100% match. There was no longer any doubt. After 28 years of uncertainty, the DNA evidence irrefutably identified Paul Hutchinson as the man who had murdered Danielle Hutchins. The case was officially closed. While Hutchinson would never face a judge or jury for his crime, the scientific evidence provided the one thing that had been missing for so long: a definitive answer. Justice had taken an unconventional route, but the truth was finally revealed. For Danielle's family, the news was a complex mix of emotions. Her youngest sister, now a woman in her 40s, spoke about the profound impact of this final resolution. She explained that while the family would always mourn Danielle, K, knowing for certain who was responsible and that he could never harm anyone again, allowed a new chapter to begin. It was the end of the haunting uncertainty that had shadowed their lives for nearly 3 decades. The killer's escape from a court trial was a bitter pill, but having the truth was a powerful form of justice in itself. After 28 years of agonizing waiting, the confirmation finally brought a sense of peace, allowing the long and difficult process of healing to truly start. The resolution of Danielle Hutchins' case is a landmark moment that extends far beyond her own family. It stands as a powerful testament to the incredible potential of forensic genetic genealogy. This case proves that even the most challenging cold cases, those involving random acts of violence by strangers with no prior connection to their victims, can now be solved. It sends a clear message that with science and persistence, there is no hiding from the past. For countless other families who are still waiting for answers in similar unsolved cases, this breakthrough offers a renewed sense of hope. It's a triumph of technology and tenacity, promising that one day they too may finally find the peace that comes with knowing the truth. In 1994, the body of 30-year-old Maloney White was discovered near Lake Mead in Las Vegas, Nevada. The scene was grim, and the answers were scarce. For nearly 3 decades, her case would remain a painful, unsolved mystery, a cold file in the archives of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Most tragically, her infant son was left to navigate life without his mother, haunted by questions he was too young to even ask. Who was responsible for this? Why did it happen? For 30 years, there was only silence. Back in the mid-90s, the dedicated investigators at the Las Vegas Metro Police did everything they could. They meticulously collected evidence from the scene, interviewed potential witnesses, and followed every lead they had. But the forensic technology of the era had its limits. The evidence they gathered held secrets, but the tools they had couldn't unlock them. DNA testing was still in its relative infancy, and the samples they had just weren't enough to build a profile of the attacker. Without any solid leads, no clear suspects, and no new information coming in, the investigation hit a wall. Maloney White's case, like so many others, went cold, leaving her family in a painful state of limbo, without justice or closure. The years turned into decades, and the hope of ever finding the truth began to fade. But in Las Vegas, a group of passionate volunteers refused to let Maloney's memory fade into obscurity. They called themselves the Vegas Justice League, a citizen-led advocacy group with a powerful mission to bring justice to the forgotten victims of violent crime. This organization wasn't just about raising awareness. They were about taking action. They dedicated themselves to fundraising, raising money specifically to apply cutting-edge forensic techniques to cold cases just like Maloney's. They believed that modern science held the key to unlocking these decades-old mysteries, and they worked tirelessly to give law enforcement the resources they needed to re-examine the evidence. Their efforts represented a new wave of hope for families who had waited far too long for answers. Thanks to the tireless fundraising of the Vegas Justice League, the evidence from Maloney White's case was finally sent to a modern forensic lab in 2024. What happened next was nothing short of remarkable. Using advanced techniques that were unimaginable in 1994, scientists were able to work with the preserved biological materials collected from the original crime scene. They carefully extracted and analyzed the samples, and this time they succeeded where previous attempts had failed. They were able to develop a full DNA profile of an unknown male genetic fingerprint, the person who had been there with Maloney that fateful day. It was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for, a ghost from the past finally given a face by science. With a complete DNA profile in hand, investigators ran it through forensic databases. The search returned a match, identifying a man named Arthur Lavery, a local Las Vegas resident. The genetic evidence was conclusive, undeniably linked Lavery to the crime scene. There was just one complication. Arthur Lavery had passed away in 2021. While the full story of what transpired between him and Maloney may never be known, the science spoke for itself. After 30 long years of dead ends and unanswered questions, police finally had a name. The mystery was solved, not in an interrogation room, but in a laboratory, thanks to a single strand of DNA for the man who was just a baby when his mother was taken from him. This news was life-altering. Now, an adult Maloney's son had grown up under the shadow of this tragedy. He had spent his entire life grappling with the unknown, wondering what had happened to his mom and who was responsible. The confirmation of the killer's identity, even though it came 30 years later, provided a profound sense of resolution. This couldn't bring his mother back, but it could answer the fundamental questions that had haunted him for a lifetime. Finally, a piece of the puzzle that had defined so much of his existence had been put into place. Upon learning the truth, the White family released a statement expressing their immense gratitude and a sense of peace. For 3 decades, they had lived with the torment of not knowing. The confirmation that Arthur Lavery was responsible, while bittersweet because he could never face a trial, brought them a definitive end to their long wait. The family thanked the Las Vegas Metro Police and, especially, the Vegas Justice League for their unwavering dedication. Having a concrete answer, a name to attach to their pain, finally allowed the process of healing to truly begin. The uncertainty was over, and while justice in a courtroom was impossible, the justice of truth had finally been served. The resolution of Maloney's case marked a significant milestone. It was the 9th cold case solved in Las Vegas through the use of investigative genetic genealogy since 2020. This incredible track record is a direct testament to the impact of the Vegas Justice League. Their advocacy and fundraising have been instrumental in providing law enforcement with the tools needed to crack these incredibly difficult cases. It's a powerful reminder that when a community comes together, demanding action and providing support, real change can happen. The work of this volunteer group shows that justice isn't just for the police and the courts, something that everyday citizens can help achieve. The story of Maloney White is a powerful illustration of how far forensic science has come. Genetic genealogy is revolutionizing how cold cases are investigated, providing answers that were once thought to be lost forever. Each time a case like this is solved, it not only brings closure to one family, but also sends a ripple of hope to countless others who are still waiting. It shows that no matter how much time has passed, there is still a chance for the truth to be uncovered. These successes are encouraging more families to push for their loved ones' cases to be re-examined, confident that the ever-advancing power of science can finally bring them the peace they deserve. In the quiet summer of 1997, a grim discovery shattered the peace of Garnet Lake, Michigan. In a humble camp latrine, the remains of a newborn baby were found. This tragic event plunged the community into a state of shock and sadness, kicking off a mystery that would haunt them for more than 2 decades. Who was this child? Who was their mother? The questions hung heavy in the air, with no immediate answers in sight. The story of baby Garnet began not with a joyful cry, but with a painful, unanswered question. The local community, heartbroken by the discovery, took the nameless infant into their hearts. They gave her a name, Baby Garnet. It was a small gesture of humanity in the face of an unthinkable tragedy. They held memorials, mourning the tiny life that ended before it truly began. For investigators, the case was a frustrating dead end. Without knowing who the mother was or the circumstances surrounding the birth, they were unable to determine what had happened. Was it a criminal act or the desperate choice of a mother in a tragic situation? The silence surrounding the case was deafening, leaving everyone to wonder. Back in 1997, the world of forensic science was very different from what we know today. DNA technology was still in its early stages. Investigators did their best, carefully collecting biological evidence from the scene, hoping it might one day provide a lead. However, the powerful tools we now take for granted, like massive DNA databases and advanced genetic genealogy, were the stuff of science fiction. The evidence sat in storage, a silent witness waiting for technology to catch up to its secrets. The case went cold, but it was never forgotten. For over 20 years, the memory of baby Garnet lived on in the hearts of the Garnet Lake community. They refused to let the infant be just another unsolved case file. Each year, they gathered for memorial services, honoring the baby they had claimed as their own. These gatherings were a symbol of their collective grief and their enduring hope. They held on to the belief that one day advances in science would finally break the silence and reveal the truth about what happened on that sad summer day in 1997. Their vigil was a testament to the community's compassion and their unwavering desire for answers. Then, in 2024, the breakthrough they had been waiting for finally arrived. The preserved DNA evidence, carefully stored for decades, was submitted for cutting-edge genetic genealogy analysis. This incredible technology, far more advanced than anything available in the 90s, could now take the smallest fragments of DNA and build a detailed family tree. Scientists and genealogists worked together, tracing the infant's genetic markers through public databases to find distant relatives. This modern forensic marvel was about to connect the dots and finally give baby Garnet her story back. The cold case was heating up, and the answers were closer than ever. The results of the analysis were nothing short of astonishing. After weeks of meticulous work, the technology successfully pointed investigators to both of baby Garnet's biological parents. By building out the family trees from the infant's DNA, they were able to identify relatives who then helped lead them to the mother and father. It was a monumental moment in the 27-year-old case. The once synonymous infant now had a lineage, a history. Authorities could finally begin to piece together the events that led to the tragic discovery in 1997. But as investigators delved deeper, the story took an unexpected and complex turn. They discovered that the baby's mother had passed away in 1995, 2 full years before the infant was born and discovered. This revelation was shocking and presented a new layer to the mystery. How was this possible? The details surrounding this finding added significant complexity to the case. After carefully reviewing all the circumstances, the Stearns County Sheriff's Office concluded their investigation, recognizing the situation was far more intricate than anyone had initially imagined. When investigators located the baby's biological father, he was completely blindsided by the news. He told them he had no idea he had ever fathered a child, let alone one born in 1997. His reaction was one of profound shock and deep sympathy for the daughter he never knew he had. His account helped to clarify the situation, painting a picture not of a crime, but of a deeply personal and multi-layered human tragedy. It became clear that this was not a case of malice, but a series of sad and unfortunate circumstances that had remained hidden for decades. After 27 long years, baby Garnet finally had her identity restored. The science that had once been a distant dream finally gave her back her name and her family history, while the circumstances surrounding her birth and death were undeniably tragic. The resolution brought a profound sense of closure. The community that had mourned an unknown infant for over 2 decades could finally say goodbye, knowing the truth. The case of baby Garnet stands as a powerful reminder of how technology can bring answers and restore dignity. Even after decades of silence, the cold cases solved in 2024 and 2025 represent a revolution in forensic justice. DNA technology and genetic genealogy have transformed seemingly impossible cases into solvable investigations, bringing closure to families who have waited decades, sometimes a lifetime, for answers. Each solved case is not just a file stamped closed. It's a name returned to a family, a story finally told, and a measure of peace for those left behind. This isn't just about science. It's about reclaiming lost narratives and delivering on a long overdue promise of justice. The faces of these grateful families tell a powerful story, one of resilience, hope, and the incredible impact of modern forensics. This wave of resolutions marks a turning point, proving that even the coldest trails can lead to the truth. At the heart of this revolution are companies like Othram Inc. and groundbreaking techniques like MVAC DNA extraction. Inside these state-of-the-art labs, forensic scientists are doing what was once considered science fiction. They are taking evidence once thought too degraded, too contaminated, or simply too small to be of any use, and are unlocking the secrets held within. A single strand of hair, a microscopic touch of skin, these can now be the keys to solving a decades-old mystery. Each technological advancement, every new method refined, opens up the possibility of solving thousands more cold cases. It's a relentless pursuit of innovation, driven by the knowledge that every piece of evidence, no matter how old, holds potential. The work being done here is rewriting the rules of what's possible in criminal investigation. Despite the incredible string of recent successes, the fight is far from over. Across the United States, evidence rooms are filled with boxes, each one representing an unsolved case, a family still waiting, a story without an ending. Thousands of cold cases remain, gathering dust on shelves. But behind each of these files are families who refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten. They are tirelessly advocating for renewed investigations, organizing fundraisers to cover the costs of advanced DNA testing, and holding on to hope with a strength that is truly inspiring. They are the driving force, reminding law enforcement and the public that these aren't just statistics. They are people who mattered, and their cases deserve to be the next breakthrough. Their unwavering dedication is a powerful testament to their love and their quest for answers. Every cold case that is solved sends a clear message. Justice, though delayed, can still be achieved. It proves that no passage of time can completely erase the truth. As forensic technology continues its rapid advancement, and as more families courageously advocate for renewed investigations, the future holds the promise of more answers, more closure, and more justice for victims who have waited generations to finally be heard. It reinforces a fundamental principle. No case is ever truly closed as long as a shred of evidence exists and there are dedicated investigators who refuse to give up. The pursuit of justice has no expiration date, and for countless families, that is the most powerful hope of all.